Joined now by Rinkwide's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter. Well, you had plenty to discuss on your show yesterday, huh?
Yeah, that was one you could have done by yourself, probably.
Honestly, how long was Rinkwide Vancouver yesterday? A 3-hour show?
I don't think it was quite 3, but and I don't know the runtime. But I mean, what a year! Like double digits in San Jose back in November, double digits here against. First time since 1990 that they had surrendered 10 goals in a hockey game, and it's incredible. The NHL does a pretty good job of getting statistics out in real time to the point that 3 hat tricks in a game hadn't happened since the Los Angeles Kings had 3 guys themselves in an 11-4 win over the San Jose Sharks way back when. So, we saw a lot of things in that game that we hadn't seen. And one of them, and really the big takeaway for me about things that we haven't seen, is just the complete lack of composure from the Vancouver Canucks. And I think more than anything, I just thought they were past this. As this group this year, all the winning, all the learning, all the structure and the staples, to watch it just get away from them in the blink of an eye. And I understand there were reasons for it, but I mean, it was breathtaking, quite frankly. And I ran out of room on my score sheet. Like, I like to keep my own stat sheet running through the game. I ran out of room. When you get to 16 and 17 goals, space becomes a commodity on the stats page.
And if I know your process, Jeff, you like to keep it on one piece of paper, right? You
absolutely.
like to have it one place.
We're not going to a second sheet.
We're not turning a page. We're not flipping the page over. It's got to be one sheet, and he ran
double-sided. Are you a sociopath? You don't write on the back side of a paper. Come on.
Hey, my grandparents were Eastern European. They grew up, and we
use all the
exactly. We didn't throw anything up. Jeff, let's just move on. We'll get back to this game in a second, but the Arshdeep Bains story, and it looks like it's going to come to fruition in an NHL debut in Denver. Just your thoughts on this story, because it's been a while, if ever, that we've seen a story like this.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be a great story if Abbotsford's leading scorer got promoted and got to make his NHL debut on a big stage like Ball Arena, the Colorado Avalanche. But the fact that he's a local guy, grew up watching and rooting for the Vancouver Canucks and had options coming out of junior and signed with his hometown team. And that just, adds so many layers to this story. And, my brief dealings with him at training camp and the preseason, he seems like a good dude who has earned everything here. Came out of junior, as so many guys do, all offense, high score, and has adapted in a relatively short period of time. And that's what you hear from Canucks management, the player development group, is how this guy has rounded out his game already and recognizes that the player that he was when he was lighting up the Western Hockey League as an overager in Red Deer, that's not the player that he has to be in the National Hockey League, and it's not the player that he has been during his 2 seasons in the minors. So, he's worked hard to be the MVP of the All-Star Weekend earlier this month down in San Jose. I mean, that was a nice feather in his cap. That's not why he's getting recalled. He's getting recalled for the work that he's put in over 2 seasons down in Abbotsford. And the minute that they signed him, they thought like this was a legitimate prospect, that this wasn't, a nice story. Oh, we'll bring a local guy in and hope for the best. They saw things in Arshdeep Bains' game that allowed them to believe that this day was possible. So, what an opportunity. Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar on the other side. The Canucks coming off the loss in Minnesota. You don't expect him to be the difference maker. That's too much to ask of anybody in their NHL debut. But I do think that this guy can provide a little bit of a spark. The way that he plays, he doesn't back down. He's fearless. And, he's got enough puck skills, obviously. He's leading Abbotsford in scoring that if he finds himself in any offensive situation, hopefully he can make something happen. But for him, it's about getting his feet wet, get that rookie lap out of the way, find your comfort level, and then it's game on in a place where Colorado, guys, frankly, doesn't lose. They got the best home ice record in the NHL, 21-5. They've won 12 of their last 13. MacKinnon's got a point in every single home game this season. So, the offensive firepower is there on the other side. We know that the Canucks don't have trouble scoring, but is this message sending from the coach, and who comes out of the lineup? I suppose some questions about Connor Garland and his availability, but you've got a fourth line that's struggling. You've got Ilya Mikheyev, who has gone dark offensively as well. So there are some options to come out of the lineup, but all indications are that Arshdeep Bains is going to make his big league debut in Denver.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar, Surrey kids, South Asian background, there's cultural significance to this storyline. You touched a little bit on his game, Jeff, but for those who are catching up with this story, tell us a little bit more about what kind of game that Arshdeep plays.
Yeah, I just think that he's a guy that, hounds pucks, and the motor is running. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not going to run through you, but he's not going to shy away either. And I guess it's a question. Like, I hope they put him in a position to succeed. Like, I think it would be fascinating if it is an Ilya Mikheyev that, like, if we got to that point where Mikheyev comes out, like, when you got a guy that has produced some offense at the minor league level, I always feel like you're not putting him in a position to succeed if you're going to give him 8 minutes on a fourth line in the NHL. But if he was to replace a guy like Mikheyev and play on a line with Teddy Bluger and Connor Garland, like, what an opportunity that would be for him. And I think it would allow him to show his two-way chops, that we know that line, when it's on, they don't spend the time in their own zone because they're positionally sound. They transition the puck well. And then when they get to work in the offensive zone, I think he could fit in seamlessly in that sort of situation. So, I don't think people, if they haven't seen him, like, he's not the fastest guy in the league, not the biggest guy in the league. Like, I don't think he's going to blow you away with any one particular skill set. It's just the fact that, again, he has transitioned from being a big scorer as an overager in the Western Hockey League, where you're 20, 21 years old playing against 16 and 17-year-olds. Now you're in professional hockey, the best league in the world, and he's had offensive success at the minor league level, and we'll see if some of that can translate now, if in fact he gets his shot here.
It's a lot to ask of him in this situation against a good team, as you talked about, but it's also a bounce back game for them attitudinally, and they need him to behave like a consummate pro, because I'm sure that's the ask of Rick Tocchet here is, guys, hello, can you be professional, please? And yet everything conspired against the Vancouver Canucks. They weren't themselves. They didn't react properly, but they got the odd bad call against them. They got 2 pucks off skates. Everything conspired against them in Minnesota. In some ways, they're due for some good bounces again here in this one versus the Colorado Avalanche, but they still have to go out there and execute and be the first place team that they appear to be.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that sentiment, but again, I think you have to remember they were up 5-2. Like, they got a lot of good things going their way, and Rick Tocchet tried to paint that post game that, like, yes, they gave up 10, and yes, they got torched on the penalty kill, and that stuff all masked a lot of the good that they did. Like, people have been a little hard on the top 6 and the All-Stars since the All-Star break. Well, JT Miller had one of his best games of the season. P.S. Suter had been quiet, but he had 3 assists. They got a Brock Besser goal. Those have been in short supply of late.
Jeff, I thought they were going to tie it. I thought they were going to tie it at 8. I really did.
Well, and I'm thinking that Rick Tocchet did as well. Just optically, I'm not sure that I would have kept the goalie out at 9-7. Like, there is something to me about double digits and giving Kaprizov the hat trick and a freebie there at the end. Whether you lose 10-7 or 9-7, ultimately you've given up way too many. But they did do a lot of good things. Unfortunately, it's a 60-minute game. It's not 40, and they don't give out any points or prizes after 2 periods of play. So, when you look at the way that the game unfolded, goals in the last minute of the first period, it would have been 2-0 going to the break, even though the Canucks had been outplayed. You wonder, would that have altered? Like, that got Minnesota on the board. It got the fans into it. And then obviously the goal in the dying seconds of the second period, instead of being 5-2, it's 5-3. Again, I think they felt like they were in striking distance. Their best players were licking their chops. And then we know what happened to start that third period of play. So Tocchet's been on his guys for a couple of games now. And he said it again post-game. Like, this isn't just 1 or 2. Too many penalties of late, and it has been a bit of an issue. And the penalty kill had been a strength since Christmas. They had worked their way up there, one of the top 5 teams in the National Hockey League since Christmas, but now all of a sudden they've been scored on in 6 of their last 10 shorthanded situations. Winnipeg got to them for 2 the other night, and obviously Minnesota got 4. The other thing, too, is the Canucks have, one of the reasons they're still a first-place team is their top-end guys have outproduced and outperformed top-end players on the other side more often than not. But Mark Scheifele had 4 points the other day. Eriksson Ek and Kaprizov both had 6-point nights. So again, they get 6. JT Miller's 4 points kind of feel like chump change at that point, but it doesn't diminish the effort of JT Miller. It's just that the Canucks all of a sudden are letting other teams' top players sort of dictate and ultimately take over hockey games. And now you're facing Nathan MacKinnon, who's second in the National Hockey League, has the most home ice points in the NHL this season, and challenges don't come a whole lot bigger than that in trying to keep him and Rantanen and Makar in check.
The PK will get some criticism because, 4 of 6 on the power play for Minnesota, but a lot of extenuating circumstances. PK people are in the box throughout that game, which of course doesn't help. And they're 5-on-3s. And I don't know about you, but I don't, I'd prefer to look at a team's 5-on-4 PK efficiency to get a real sense of how your PK is doing. You let in 3 5-on-3 goals. I know that's not great, but 2 is very reasonable given you've given them 4 opportunities of like at least a minute long. I mean, I don't.
What is conversion rate on 5-on-3 in the NHL? I'd be interested in that stat.
Yeah, I don't have that one offhand. I know that the Canucks have given up more 5-on-3 goals than anybody else in the National Hockey League. And somebody pointed out to me too that, when you just point out, the Canucks have been short 5-on-3 11 times this season, how many of those are close to 2 full minutes of 5-on-3, and how many are a penalty at the tail end of one, and then
Right.
9 seconds of 5-on-3. Every 5-on-3 sort of looks the same according to the National Hockey League in that regard. So yeah, I think you do have to parse the statistics a little bit more there. And you're right, like that is so unnatural. Again, I think I saw that you had to go back to Torts' time, that 9-1 loss in Anaheim that preceded Torts storming the Flames locker room, where the Canucks had a 7-minute 5-on-3 against them, and Anaheim went to town and ultimately won that hockey game 9-1. That was the last time that a team had scored 5 times 5-on-3 in a hockey game. So it doesn't happen very often. Things, basically a decade apart here. Whatever the case, when you did they get the short end of the officiating? Maybe, but Tyler Myers clearly got away with a pick on the opening goal, and people don't want to remember that part of it. So I do think at times it cuts both ways. And ultimately, outside of the Elias Lindholm roughing penalty on the first 5-on-3, I felt the other ones were warranted. If the Canucks had a legitimate complaint, I think it was, why didn't the whistle sound when it looked like Casey DeSmith had the puck covered and then Ian Cole had the puck covered? I bet you more often than not, in that situation, a whistle sounds. But in that moment yesterday, the play was allowed to continue. You have to play to the whistle ultimately. And that just continued that snowball effect there that ultimately led to the 10-7 loss. So, look, they've been good about bouncing back all season long. I'll give them an opportunity, but this one's a little bit of a different beast, obviously, going into Colorado back-to-back at altitude with an Avalanche team that hasn't played since Sunday afternoon. So they'll be the more rested team at home. And Canucks played hard against Colorado back in November, lost 5-2 in their last meeting. So they played with them for 40 minutes, but ultimately Colorado pulled away. And, 3 losses in a row for the Vancouver Canucks. Gasp. Could it be? The fact that we're sitting here past mid-February and they haven't lost 3 in a row is absolutely a tribute to the kind of season that this Vancouver Canucks team has put together.
This is dated information from December 8th. It's Gabe Desjardins is behind the net site. 5-on-3, 60 seconds of 5-on-3. It's a 30% conversion percentage for just that season. Now it stands to reason if you double that, okay, so it moves to 60%, but of course there's very few 2-minute 5-on-3s. There's usually just, a minute and change. And incidentally, it was a 12% conversion rate for a 60-second 5-on-4 back then. So gives you an idea of the scale.
More than doubles the percentage.
Yes, and more than doubles the percent. Okay, so let me ask you the poll then. Do you trust the Canucks to respond to adversity, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and predict a win. I think they're up against it against Colorado, but I am curious to see, how do they control the things that they can control? Do they show a little bit more discipline if the game gets away from them, if they fall behind? You can't throw in the towel. You can't look to the referees and throw your hands in the air. 60 minutes of hockey. And so I'm looking for a response that way. And I'm not talking about a physical response. I just want to see this team sort of show the professional discipline that's necessary to deal with some of the hurdles that you're going to face down the stretch and into the playoffs. Everything's gone the Canucks' way this year. That's just not the way it normally is. And so I think that they have to be prepared to deal a little bit better with adversity. And I go back, we haven't talked since the Winnipeg game, but did they feel they got the short end of the calls there too? Maybe, but guess what? It was 2-2 going to the third period. Like, that's a game that the Canucks win most of the times. They find ways to get the goals they need, and in that case, game got away from them, and then obviously the game in Minnesota got away from them. So back to the staples, back to the non-negotiables. Rick Tocchet has instilled an awful lot of confidence in this group, and I think that's maybe the disappointing thing too, is that if all of their top end guys had taken the day off in Minnesota, you'd think, all right, like, those kinds of games happen, but they score 7. They get 2 goals from defensemen. I was looking at it. Every defenseman in uniform had a point. Like, that doesn't happen very often. Minnesota scored 10, and only 3 of the defensemen chipped in yesterday. So, like, again, things happen for the Vancouver Canucks. Unfortunately, too many things happen in their own zone. And one of the things that kind of has flown under the radar a little bit, guys, too, is that, like, Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek were on the ice for 5 of the 10 Minnesota goals. Now, a couple empty netters, so that does factor into it. But still, if you're on the ice for 5 goals against in the National Hockey League, that's not a great day at the office. And that pair has been so good for the Vancouver Canucks, but didn't like, sort of how easily they allowed the Wild to score a couple of their 5-on-5 goals. And the one off the skate late in the first period, Quinn Hughes had pretty good stick position, but you need some body position there. And then the other one, and maybe they were caught on a line change, but Matt Boldy gets in behind the defense and made that one look pretty easy as well. So, if we're looking for responses and we're looking for bounce back and all that kind of stuff, I think it has to start at the top. The captain, Quinn Hughes, I'm not sure that he's played his best hockey since the All-Star break. And with Makar on the other side tonight, the stakes are high. Let's hope that Quinn Hughes has one of those Quinn Hughes types bounce back games himself, and the rest of the team follows in line.
Yeah, the Rossi goal. I mean, they just ate that pair's lunch on that goal. Beat him behind the net, got possession, got it to the net front. It's behind DeSmith and in the goal.
One Top Gun didn't play last night, guys. That you talk about the Top Guns showing up. One guy didn't play, and that's Thatcher Demko. Does Thatcher Demko win them that game? And I think the answer is yes. And I think that tonight versus another goaltender that has an .898 save percentage in Georgiev.
That's your big advantage.
That's your big advantage here. Like, that's your bounce back, isn't it, Jeff?
Well, and look, I understand where Rick Tocchet was coming from yesterday. His hands tied a little bit, knowing that Demko was going to get the start today. And so that was Casey DeSmith's game. Mm-hmm. But I think there's enough to go around here. I'm not sure that I like the coaching job of Rick Tocchet. And I haven't said that very often, but no timeout. Where's a chance to show a little emotion behind the bench, but maybe he was worried of taking a penalty that his team couldn't kill off. Whatever the case, it seemed a little passive behind the bench, and I guess pulling the goaltender, Minnesota did, and it worked out okay for them. Tocchet probably just didn't feel he had that at his disposal. So we'll never know. But yes, I'd like to think that somewhere along the line, your goalie's got to be your best penalty killer. Thatcher Demko generally is that, and it is. It's not front burner, but again, I think it's worth mentioning that Casey DeSmith, who was so good prior to Christmas, has 1 win in 6 starts now since Christmas. They need him to play. Like, Demko can't play every game. And I do wonder, after giving up 8 and a 10-7 loss, the Canucks have these 3 losses on the record now when they've had a lead after 2 periods. All 3 of those have been with Casey DeSmith in goal. Like, you've got to find a way to lock it down. He had a 5-2 lead to work with. He had a 3-1 lead in Detroit not that long ago in the third period. So I am curious where they are with that goaltending dynamic right now about, do they still trust DeSmith the way they did early in the season, or where are you going to get him some spot starts here? Because Thatcher Demko, the pace that he's on right now is okay, but he's going to be close to a 60-game pace, which that starts to get into dicey territory when you need him rested and ready to go in the playoffs. And they are still going to be a playoff team despite the bottom falling out yesterday. I think we do have to keep big picture stuff here in mind, but goaltending hasn't been an issue. But I do wonder a little bit moving forward here, what do you do with Casey DeSmith? Do they still have the same confidence and trust in him that they did earlier in the season, because he's not delivering victories when he gets in there between the pipes?
Great shout, incidentally. Very passive on the Canucks bench last night. We were sitting in here talking about that as we watched the game. No timeout from Tocchet. You mentioned MacKinnon. Is he your Hart Trophy favorite right now? And we talked a lot of Hart Trophy earlier in the year, gentlemen. I may remind you, is there any chance in what's left in the schedule, Jeff, that you think a Canuck could take a run at the MVP?
I don't. I think there'd be some vote splitting just with the seasons that they've had. I think that there's now a fascinating goal derby for the Vancouver Canucks own team goal scoring race and points as well. But no, I mean, there's a gap there. Kucherov and MacKinnon, obviously. We'll see what Connor McDavid has to say. Of course, now I'm seeing all of these stories originating out of Toronto. How can anybody but Austin Matthews be the Hart Trophy winner with the goal scoring season he's having? And it is ridiculous, the pace that he's on. But like, honestly, I've seen a couple like, how can it be anybody but? Well, I can make a pretty strong argument, I think, for a couple of other candidates. So this idea that it's just goal scoring for Austin Matthews. Nathan MacKinnon is one of my favorite players to watch. I can't imagine trying to defend him, and that's going to be the challenge for the Vancouver Canucks, obviously. But I think MacKinnon, the pace that he's on, the way that he's playing, just controlling games and dominating games and winning games on his own, I think he's going to be right there until the end. So I still think it's a 3 or a 4 horse race in terms of the Hart, and I would think that Nathan MacKinnon is right there in the middle of things, and 2 games left against the Vancouver Canucks, so we'll see how they go about defending him, starting with this one.
Same question on the Calder. Is Hughes the favorite right now? Is it Makar? And, we talked Saturday that
Norris. We
talked about the Vezina on Saturday, Hellebuck and Demko as a showdown. What's your sense on the Norris and whether Hughes is ahead of Makar at this stage in the proceedings?
Well, he is by points, and that certainly will get people's attention. By the way, Cale Makar's gone 5 games without a point, longest stretch of his NHL career. So, that he's going to be fueled and motivated to put an end to that. Yeah, I think Quinn Hughes, early on, there was still some slights around the National Hockey League, and then it felt like the entire Canuck fan base rose up, and I think people around the league started to take note of the way that he was tilting the ice in the Canucks' favor, just not the points, but, again, he has sort of, he's changed the way we define defending because he spends most of his time up ice and doesn't have to defend an awful lot. Yeah, I want to believe that, it's probably close and maybe Makar has closed the gap a little bit. And obviously he's got the pedigree. And so some people may lean his way, but I think Quinn Hughes has done enough. I just think Quinn Hughes hasn't been his dynamic self since the All-Star break. That the points are there. He's so talented that I think he's got 6 points in 8 games, which would be great for most guys. But for Quinn Hughes, that's a 60-point pace as opposed to, the 90-point pace that he's on for the season. He has fallen off the 100-point projection now. Like he's going to have to pick that up again here. Now, if they get the power play going, I think that would go a long way to helping him in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I want to see him getting back to dominating and just taking over hockey games and being untouchable. And you saw Winnipeg, Meshnikov got a pretty good piece of him in front of the Canucks bench. I think more and more teams are going to try, easier said than done, to make his life miserable. And he knows that when he gets to the playoffs, that's certainly going to be the case as well. So a lot of this is good preparation for him. I just think that his play has fallen off a notch, which isn't a knock on him. It's just that he has set the bar so high. I don't think that he's at that level right here, right now, but hopefully he'll get back there.
And the forgotten guy, not in the Norris race, but just on the Colorado Avalanche, Cranbrook's Bowen Byram, 3 straight 2-point games going into this
which is good because he had begun to look like he
apparently coach read him the riot act, and he has responded here. Great stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. We'll catch up on Friday.
All right, guys. Sounds good.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.